Alright guys, we have the new Drak here. We're going to go over the initial inspection and prep on what you need to do to go ahead and build this thing. So basically, when you get the aircraft, the first thing you're going to want to do is just look at it, make sure it all looks, looks like it's pretty good, not dented and whatnot. And then the first thing we do with the airplane is we go through and we slice off the filler ports. So you can see here where I've already sliced off one of the filler ports, but basically you're going to get a new snap razor, and all the filler ports that are on the bottom of the aircraft's wings and fuselage, you're going to go through and you're going to slice these off nice and even. So just make them nice and clean, use a brand new snap razor. This really helps. After you clean all these ports off, what I usually do is I sand the airplane's shiny surfaces. Anything where glue is going to match up to any other part that's going to actually, have a surface where pieces are matching. So the spar slots all have these caps. So all these caps, I've gone through and sanded the shiny stuff off everywhere we're going to be putting glue and mating surfaces, because if you do that, this glue is going to stick much better. Because not many glues like to stick to EPP because it's a closed pore type foam. So the trick is to go ahead and get that stuff roughed in and scruffed in. So the main spar slots, I will run through those main spar slots and I will sand all of these out. I made this with a piece of skateboard grip tape. It's like about 80 grit and just a piece of the fiber. You can do it with just about anything you can think of, probably 80 grit sandpaper or whatnot. But go through and remove the shiny stuff on the inside of those spots. So you're going to want to do that to all the slots where any of these basically pieces are going to mount. So basically when you put your spars in, all these pieces go behind it. And you want the glue to adhere to them. So after you basically glue all this stuff together, you're going to be putting these in, and this will help everything stick together much better. When you're putting glue on shiny foam to shiny foam, it doesn't like to stick that well. And EPP itself really doesn't like a whole lot of stuff stuck to it. So basically you're going to take this aircraft and you're going to sand down all of your pieces where you're going to have mating pieces in spar slots or whatnot. Another thing I also do when I prep it is I also do the outer spar slots. We'll go through and sand all those out nice and smooth because we want the glue to stick to these. Because if you don't do it, it just isn't going to stick as well. I also, after sanding all my spar slots out, anywhere I'm sticking glue, I also sand the motor mount, all the perimeter of the motor mount where the motor mount's going to actually go down. I sand all that down too because that's all going to get glued in. So all these pieces, I give them a pre-prep and sand. Another thing I also do is come to the bottom of the airfoil. On the top of the airfoil, I've had this area left off. And it's because when we press these on the bench flat, it helps it out. So what I've also done is now, since I really like doing that on the top, I've actually started slicing them off the bottom. It's just something I've come up with since I've built a few of these already. So I'll go ahead and slice this area flat off here. So this area is off about to the first spar slot. And it makes this aircraft, when you're actually pressing the wings the other way on the table to get the trailing edge straight, it makes them sit on the table nice and even. And another thing I do, because I found that goop seems to work the best on this, is when I'm putting these spar slots in, I'll usually trim these back to where they're only sticking out about an inch, but I trim the edge of the slots out. After I trim these edges of the slots out, it allows this piece of fiberglass to hang out off the edge. So when I'm gluing these in and fill this spar channel with goop, I give them a couple spins, and at that point, if this is hanging out past, this really helps. And then once everything is glued up and dry after the day, you go ahead and clip these back nice and straight to the very edge. So that's the initial inspection and the initial prep to the airframe here. So I will go ahead and get the spar sleeves and spars actually cut, and we're going to go over the actual spar installation on the next video. But if you do these areas where you get all of your filler nubs cut off, you get a couple of these areas prepped, get everything sanded out, now you're ready to go ahead and to start putting in your spars. So that will be next. Okay, with the Drak, you get two main spars. One's 32 inches long, 12.7 millimeters in diameter, and it comes with the sleeve on it. Yeah, then you end up getting a 9 millimeter spar. It goes for the rear spar slot in this as a main, and it is 24 inches long. And it also has a sleeve on it. So you basically need to put the sleeves in the fuselage and in the actual wings before anything. But before you do that, you need to cut the sleeve into its right lengths. So because you have one in the wing for the small one in the very middle here, and then one in the other wing. So basically you have 3 pieces on each one of these spars that go in the aircraft, and you need to pull out the actual carbon, do not cut it, and you take the sleeves and you cut the sleeves to the right length. So the sleeves that go in the wings here, all these end up getting glued in. And the same with the actual front spars. Everything gets glued in with the sleeves do. And then all these get put in their slots. Same here. So, after we cut these pieces, after we cut the pieces to length, I take the sandpaper and I rough these up too. I'll go through and take the shininess off of the sleeves. So before they are glued in, they're roughed up. And then before I actually put them in the slot, I take some tape, cap the ends so the glue does not get in the sleeves. You cap the ends of these before they are glued into the slots. And then what ends up going on is they get put down in the slots, and when you glue them in, you just glue them in and hold them in with your fingers. So each one of these sleeves gets capped and dropped in. Cap them nice. You can use masking tape, you can use clear tape, however you want. But the main goal is not to let any glue get into the end of the spar slot. Into the sleeves. So, now that we have those done, all these holes have been sanded. The spar sleeves have been sanded. Everything has been pretty much sanded and ready to go. So what we do is we put these spar, how about this? We'll start on the fuselage. We'll put these actual spar sleeves in the fuselage, but we do it with hot glue. So these are basically held in with hot glue for the initial point, and that's basically to hold it in until the goop dries. So after we put them in with hot glue, we'll go through and actually goop these in. So the main trick with this is start maybe a 1/4 inch from the end. A decent bead, not huge. Mind you, this isn't the major part of the strength. This is just to hold this in and get this sleeve put in. So your main spar will drop right into the fuselage. Stop it short. Make sure you pre-fit all of this before you glue any of this together. And then you basically push it to the very bottom, just like I'm doing here, and squeeze it in nice and tight and push it to the bottom until the glue is in for, say, a minute or so. Maybe even a little longer. And what that does is I'm pulling up on the actual fuselage. It's straightening up the fuselage if it's not straight, and it's gluing that spar right into the very bottom of the spar channel. So, and then you end up doing this with all of the spars. So your front main, your rear main, your wings are all basically a bead of hot glue into the very bottom, and then you drop the spar in and you hold it in until that spar dries, or cools off, I should say. Sometimes it takes a little bit just because the foam is an insulator, but hold it in until it cools off, and then same with the wings. The wings, make sure you pre-fit all this before you do it. Run a bead of hot glue. I've already got the ends capped with tape. Bead of hot glue in here. Drop it into the very bottom. Make it flush with the end. Pinch these down. Put this on a nice flat table and just push straight down. You want them just in the very bottom of the channel. That's pretty much it. Do this on all of the spar channels. When you get done, you can slide your mains in, make sure everything lines up. If you have a problem with any of the alignment, after you do all these and you slide all your spars and everything together, if you're having a problem with the alignment at all, spray a little bit of denatured alcohol on the wing half or on this area, any of the other spars that aren't lined up. And as soon as you spray denatured alcohol on any of that hot glue, you can peel the hot glue and you can peel this out completely. So, and you can start over. So that gives you the capability of lining all of these up, and if they're not aligned, the hot glue will let you pull everything apart. So say this spar wasn't lined up and your wings didn't match up. Spray a little denatured alcohol in there, apply a little bit of pressure on the end, and you can pull these right out. And that gives you that capability. So, you know, having that, then you know when you're done, you can check it and everything should be, you know, able to be adjusted if need be. So, okay, now we have the actual spar slots. Everything's lined up, all the sleeves have been put in. I slid the spars in so you can see it. If you look down the channels, you can see that the spar slots are aligned. The channels inside are kind of fuzzy because, yeah, they've been sanded down, but like I was saying before, if none of this did, or some part of this did not line up, you could spray denatured alcohol in here before this next process, and you can reglue and reset and realign something up in case you got it off. So go through, inspect, make sure you look good, make sure all these spar slots are straight, and you know everything looks fairly straight, top and bottom. You know, just take a good eyeball at it. And then what we end up doing now, the next step is I'll go ahead and pull these apart. Okay, pull all the spar slots out because everything looks good. And what we do is now the hot glue is stuck in there to hold these while the goop is drying. So what I'm going to end up doing now is in the wings and in the middle of the actual fuselage, I'm going to take goop. I got goop with a skinny tip on it. If you want to come in close here, you can see what I do is, you know, fairly generously is in the crack of this is I will add goop in here because this is the actual strength. And the goop, when you put it into the side, will slide around the tube and lock it in. And when you sanded the spar slots, you allowed this goop to stick very, very good to this sanded EPP. So we've also, you know, again, sanded the glass sleeves, so they will take the goop really well, and they'll stick to the hot glue really well. So now this is basically the next step. You're going to want to go in and lock all of these in, including the ones on the fuselage. And this is your main strength. And then we'll go through and do the capping of these here in a few. So with that goop in, the goop really isn't strong, heavy. What ends up happening is the hot glue is heavier than the goop. So I try to go very sparingly on the actual hot glue, and then the goop itself is about 80% solvent, you know, 20% material. So even though it goes on thick, when it's all said and done, the goop actually kind of goes away as far as its weight. And then here, again, main spar slots in the bottom of the plane is we're putting a layer of goop only where the spar touches foam. We're not running it through the center of the fuselage because the center of the fuselage is blank and there's no foam in it and there's nowhere to actually glue it. I haven't tried any other glues, but I've been using goop for a long time, and the goop for this kind of process on EPP, when you're gluing a composite, say like fiberglass tubes to EPP, it works really, really well. I wouldn't suggest anything, you know, too far away from that type of glue, a goop and a good poly solvent-based rubber cement type glue. And we'll do the same on the other sides. You will probably go through 2 full tubes at least on this plane, 2 to 3 full tubes of goop. Because all the spars get put in this way with goop. Even the fiberglass spars on the tops of the wings and the bottoms of the wings, and the fuselage spars all get put in with goop. There we go. Okay, you can stop it. Okay, I have the wing ready. I have the spar sleeves cut to length, glued in, hot glued, and then gooped in. All the spar slots have been sanded smooth. Actually, it's not smooth, but roughened up because I've just got the skin, the shiny skin off of it. I've actually gone through and sanded the skin off all of the pieces where foam is meeting foam. I've gone through and sanded the joining areas. Anywhere where anything's going to be getting glued, I sanded. And same with the micro one. So I made sure they're the right ones. They have the lines going across where the mating spars go across. End up putting those in there just like this. So I'm going to go over the process of gluing these in. So what we do to glue these in is, because the fill on them is a little bit low, but I left that low like that so we can fill it with a little bit of Gorilla Glue. So now what we'll end up doing to make this happen is I will take my regular Gorilla Glue and I'll put just like not even a dime size, maybe a couple peas worth into a Jello shot cup that you get at your local party store. I mix a little bit of the white glue with a little bit of the Gorilla Glue instead of using water, and this allows this foam to kick into a very high density foam. Instead of with big bubbles, it has a lot of small bubbles. So, and be sparing, this stuff goes a long ways. Mix it up until it looks like you got honey with butter. And the ratio on this is probably like 20% white glue to 80% Gorilla. Doesn't have to be too aggressive. Throw your sticks away, you don't want them sitting around. They'll glue everything to your bench. We'll go ahead and put a little bit of Gorilla Glue in there. Not much. Just a small bead on the top. That's it. Each slot gets the most micro small amount. Don't go all the way to the tip. Go. What we do is we come into the spar slot, we add glue around its perimeter. Hot glue. This will seal the Gorilla from coming out on top of the airplane, for one thing. Just makes a nice cap, and hot glue and EPP work really well together. So, any excess hot glue, go ahead and remove it. You want to pretty much put that bad boy right where it needs to go. And hold it. If you find that it's sinking a little bit, you can always lift it up a little bit with a pin or whatnot. Get it straightened out. There you go. And then you go ahead and do the other one. So, you can be fairly generous on this. It doesn't have to be too crazy, but a little hot glue on the inside. Because your Gorilla is pretty much going to be your strength and your filler and what's holding this cap in here. Same thing with this one. Pop it in. And the Gorilla is just going to fill the gaps through there, and it's going to glue the cap in from the other side because you've sanded the entire cap down. Lift it up a little bit, but then push it back in, but hold it right where it needs to go until it tacks up enough to where you feel comfortable that it's not going to move. It looks good. And then we know that this is going to grow out a little bit here. And I don't worry about the Gorilla getting into the spar tube or anything like that, because after about 30 minutes you can pull it apart, and any Gorilla that might get in there, any of that Gorilla Glue, you just pull it out. Stick something pokey like a screwdriver or something in there and pull it out. So just cap this at the end, just so that it doesn't go on your bench. With this one, just cap it. Okay, To put the main spar caps in the fuselage, what I do is I go in and I tape these areas out. Anywhere the Gorilla Glue that's going to end up coming back and through. So what I'll do is I'll take the tape and just run it in here so the Gorilla Glue doesn't work its way into the fuselage. And then the rest of the spar cap, you'll see it in here after we install it, but I'm just trying to keep the glue from bleeding into these areas and just causing a mess for no reason. And if you do have any glue come in those areas, if you get to it within the first hour, you can usually pick it out pretty easy. And the Gorilla Glue sticking to this closed cell foam, it usually, if it's not dry, you know, like 2 days old or a day old, it comes off it pretty easy. So if you do see some oozing in here and some of the glue does come through, don't disturb it. Wait till it's an hour or so old and then you can pick it right off. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and glue in the main spar slots. First thing you do, make sure all your spots are sanded like before, like we were talking. Sand down both sides of your mains. Fit your mains in. Mark which end is the back end. Because if you get them wrong, you're going to be scrambling while you're trying to get this done. So I marked the back. So when I put it here and I slide it in, I have it ready to go. And you got to work this kind of fast because you're working with hot glue. So both of them, again, I have the backs marked and I have them sit. So basically what we're going to end up doing is we'll go ahead and start with the first one. And we're going to use a combination of Gorilla Glue mixed with the white glue. And we're also doing hot glue and goop. So we got 3 types of glue that need to be staged in this process. I have a minimal amount, I'd say maybe a little less than not even a quarter ounce of Gorilla Glue here. And we're going to go ahead and add a little white glue to that and do our standard process, maybe, you know, 20% white glue, 80% Gorilla. Always have a little bit more ready too, just in case. But don't mix it yet. So get that stuff mixed in. I got my hot glue gun ready to go with the full stick on there. I got my goop ready to go, a good tube. And like I said before, we don't put a bunch in there. You can look at the inside of the spar slot. You can see where I had put the tape so it doesn't let everything through. So we're only going to do Gorilla Glue from the spars out pretty much. So, and this is just basically to add the strength for the spar cap to be holding the spar in. So we're going to add just a small bead on top, just enough for some filler, because there's about a 2 millimeter gap in there that we want the Gorilla Glue to squish around and lock the spar cap in. So that's it. Not too crazy, just a little bit. And I'll go through and run a bead of goop inside that crack. So we're going to go like this. Move that out of the way real quick. Kind of low, not too high. About medium depth in there, all the way across. All the way across. So now if you look in there, I got a little bit of goop on the inside of the spar slot. You can see it in there. Now I got everything ready with the hot glue. And what I do is I'll take the hot glue and put very fast fashion, because you can't mess around with this. Know where the back is, have it ready, and we're going to come in and we're going to go bead a goop just above that. Bead a hot glue just above the goop, not a nice bead, not on the goop, but just above it. Okay, and what this does is going to let the Gorilla Glue not push out, and it's also going to hold this cap in. So with a little bit of swiftness, while it's all going down, you push this nice down right in. You line up your spar slots, make it nice and level. Take a look at it all the way across, make sure it's looking fairly level, because that hot glue pretty quick is going to lock it all in. There you go. And just for fun, throw that across there. Pull the back of the plane up just a little bit so you kind of squish that joint closed a little bit. And there you go. And then we'll do just like we did on the wings. And we'll add tape on the end, because if this Gorilla Glue comes out, we don't want it getting on your workbench. And we don't care if it gets in the end of the tube a little bit. Like I said, you can poke it out.
Later on, yeah.
No problem. So now you got the ends capped. It's been glued in. You put your Gorilla Glue in, mixed with the white glue, you added a little bit of goop across the perimeter, and then you added a little bit of hot glue, and that's what's going to hold it in place while the other glue's dry. So adding the hot glue in there is what will allow this to dry and the actual Gorilla Glue to expand, because if you didn't put the hot glue in there and this kind of expanded, what'll happen is the spar will get pushed, the spar cap will get pushed out, and that's what we don't want. So that's the reason for the hot glue in there, and you want the actual goop to be the strength and the Gorilla Glue to be the strength, but the main reason for the hot glue is so the spar cap doesn't get pushed out. We're going to go ahead and do the rear spar slot now. So same thing we did on the front spar slot. This is a little bit smaller slot, so it doesn't need hardly, like I said, any glue for this. Same thing with the back one here. Just one little bead in there. Always be frugal. I always mix too much Gorilla Glue, even though I'm trying to be frugal. So we'll go through and we will add the bead of goop inside, like we did on the front one. So I'm just putting a bead of goop, your strength. Like I said before, the goop itself is only about 20% of its weight. The rest of it, 80% of it or so, is solvent. So this stuff gases off really well, and it leaves hardly any weight on the aircraft. Okay, now, with the goop being in, I got this marked as the back, so we know where the back is.
I can see B on it.
You see the B on it. So we're going to go here around the perimeter again, adjacent to this goop, just above it. And we're putting hot glue, which is going to lock it in. So if the Gorilla Glue foams, it does not push the spar cap off. Any goop or hot glue you get on the plane. If you do get a lot of any hot glue on the plane, like I said, you can put, there's the back, you can put a little bit of denatured alcohol on anything that gets spilt on the plane if it's hot glue, and it will pull it right off. So there we go. Push that in, just like you did the front spar. Make it nice and even. All the way across. And then, again, you can pull it. I'm going to pull the slot closed just a little bit. Boom. It'll hold it. Doesn't have to be crazy tight, just enough to close the gap a little bit. You don't want to pull it too hard and distort the back of the airfoil of the plane. And you can already see the Gorilla Glue is trying to come out the ends on both ends, even on that end. These spar caps are a little long. When you get done, you just trim the ends off. Here's your spar cap. Just keep it from going on your table. Same with the other end. Okay, we're going to go through and put the fiberglass spars in the bottom of the fuselage. You're going to need hot glue and goop for this application. The first thing you want to do is in the very front of the curvature of the actual fuselage, you're going to want to put about a very light bead, about an inch, inch and a quarter long or so. And the trick is you're going to want to push this spar down into that bead, and you can see my hand in the way it's being pushed. And once that is down into that bead, take your finger and burn it with the hot glue and just wipe the hot glue off, and then hold this spar in here like this until it dries. And we're basically putting it down in the front of this so we can start wrapping this fuselage, and that's the only way you're going to get to be able to hold this down. Once it's a little bit tacked up, you can take a modeling pin while it's drying and put it in there just to hold it for now. And then you can come across and do the other spar here, same thing. get it down and encapsulate a little bit of that hot glue. Wipe it off. Ouch. And let it be. And you can see, now we'll be able to wrap the contour of the rest of the fuselage back here once they're like that. So, now I can come back and, I'd say about midpoint, about where the
hump is.
The hump is for the skid. Same thing, come back and push that down, get it to encapsulate itself a little bit in the hot glue, and wipe it off. And the same thing with that one. Once it's a little bit dry, a little bit cool, go ahead and pin it down for the rest of the time with hobby T-pin. Hobby T-pins are really useful to have around here. Same with that one. What we're going to do at the end here is we're going to run a bead of goop over the top of all of this stuff. Now, what we're going to do is just in front of the actual curvature of the curve here, about halfway into the curve, we'll go ahead and add a little hot glue in there. So you can manipulate it and get about half the curve done. Press it down. Again, wipe the excess glue off and hold it in place. Have your hobby pins handy. Pin it in a few places so it doesn't wander on you.
Yeah.
Same with the other side. You can do one at a time. You don't have to do them both at a time, but I've been kind of working the process. When you do both at a time, one nice thing is it doesn't allow the fuse to distort because you're kind of working the fuselage equal pressures on both sides. So wipe it off, pin it down. And the reason you're wiping some of it off is because we're gonna goop over it, and I want the goop to still kind of encapsulate the spar. So come down past that last needle and go ahead and work a little bit of glue back in it. Maybe come down an inch or two past the curve, and again, wipe it off and get it out of the way. Hold it for a second. On this build, we use a lot of hot glue to hold things in place while other glues dry. And hot glue is kind of a tool. You don't want to do the whole thing in hot glue because you want a good part of the spar to be wrapped in the goop. And then come back and trim this to the right length so it's there and ready to go. And then in the middle, add one little quick dab in the middle, push it down, wipe it off. And right before it curves, just a little dab, maybe 10, 12 millimeters long, 3/8 of an inch, something like that, and hold that in place. Okay, and then manipulate it a little bit, get past the curve, and go ahead and glue the whole curve all the way back to the tail. You might need to let it cool off just a little bit before you touch it. It's a little bit temperamental. Hot glue it into a few places. pin it in a few places. There you go. And that's basically how you're going to glue that spar in, and then work the other spar the same way. I'm going to pull these pins off here, and we'll start at the front end. We'll pull the pins off here in a second, and we'll run a bead of goop across. Okay, we've put the spars in with hot glue. We got the contours for the bottom of the spars, turning right, all locked in with hot glue. So now you take a decent sized tube of goop that you have left over, and I basically push it straight down and flat right onto the spar. I use the goop as the actual goop tip as the actual spreader, and remember, a lot of this goes away because 80% of this is solvent. So I'm trying to cover this to where the goop is getting around the fiberglass spar and down into the channel. And I leave a little extra in the front. I always put a little extra in the back. It'll shrink down and suck itself right down into that spar slot after a bit. We'll start on the other one. We're going to go ahead and spar the I-beam spars in the bottom of the right wing. I usually start with the bottom. I've taken the actual wing itself and cut a couple spar slot sections to where when you are manipulating these fiberglass spars, they can go out past the wing tips here. I'm sorry, the roots here. Because when we impregnate this with goop, we want to be able to twist these spars within their spar slots. So this gives me a little handle so I can give this a twist when we're done. And this will go ahead and let the glue wrap around the spar. So now that we have this set, I will go ahead and put a little bit of weight here for now. And what I've done, prior to even putting this together, I've taken the wing and I've taken a look at it and I've manipulated it a little bit and I've made sure it's fairly straight before I've even started this process. And you could do this, say, prior to doing it, bend it a little bit, take a look down the trailing edge, make sure it looks pretty straight before you do this process. But once it's pretty straight, you put it down like this. I tape it to the table. So now I put a little weight on it. The table I have here is perfectly flat. I've made this table shimmed up to be flat and true. So now the aircraft being flat and true, I have it taped to the trailing edge. These wings do not have any twist in it, so that's what's nice about building this airplane. You don't have to worry about having a jig and having to put some twist in the in the actual airfoils. So they don't need it. They already are designed without it. So I will go ahead and install a couple pins here to keep these weights from traveling.
Sliding off, yeah.
Sliding off. And it will also, while this is drying overnight, it'll help the trailing edge be pressed to where it's true and keeps it true while the glue is drying. So, doing this, you don't want to put any weight on the front of the airfoil. Once you press the trailing edge true, it pretty much stays true. The whole airfoil will be true. You can look at it before you do it, and like I said, manipulate it to make it nice and straight. But check your spar, make sure it doesn't have any major curves or anything in it. Take your goop, do like you did on the regular bottom of the fuselage spars. And I will wipe a little excess off there. And same thing with this, a nice puddle. Just like you're caulking it in right over this spar. And give it a little twist. Make sure it doesn't travel up. If it travels up a little bit, you can take the pieces of the spar that you had clipped off and use that to push it down in a few places. So, if you think that you might have traveled, go ahead and put it down in a few places and push it down. I don't think it has. And I had given it a spar, so now it actually wrapped the spar slot. I use a little bit of spit on my finger, and it helps us slide. There you go. Now your spar is now impregnated with goop. And as the goop shrinks, as it's drying, it will suck down all around the spar and suck the spar right down into the slot. There's no need to pin that in. And the same thing with the back one. Twist, and if you're, like I said, if you're feeling like you want to push it down a little bit, you can. But what I have found, even when it is suspended in the glue, as the glue dries and shrinks and the solvent's gas off, it does pull the spar right down into the slot. And that's what you do that with both of these wings on the trailing edge like this, and we do it mirrored exactly the same way on the top of the wing. So you really don't change the process at all. But the only thing I've done on the top of the wing and the bottom of the wing to do this process is I've cleared on the bottom a little bit here, so when we press the wing, it doesn't have that filleted edge around there. So when you're pressing the trailing edge on the bench, say when we flip over the top, we do the same thing. The most important part of the whole aircraft in the build is this trailing edge. If you can press the trailing edge straight, it's the thinnest edge. It straightens the airfoil out. So pressing that in, locking this down the same way on the top as we just did the bottom will make this airfoil straight. If you find that you do this one side and you pull it tomorrow and you look at it and it's a little bit crooked, say this wing here is a little crooked tomorrow and I see it's just a little bit, before you glue the top ones in tomorrow, manipulate it a little bit, look down the leading, look down the trailing edge, make sure it looks straight, and then lock it in. Once you lock it in, the final ones on the top tomorrow, you'll find that this thing will stay super straight and super true. You don't want to use anything pretty much, you know, rather than goop on this stuff, because this being non-porous and the spar being non-porous, I find that the goop sticks to this stuff better than any of the other glues I've used. You don't want to use super glue or anything along those lines. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and install the motor mount. The plate itself has been sanded really well, so it accepts glue really, really well. The motor mount and the clearances, you can see, are very, very tight going into the back of this thing. So this has to be very, very straight. You can see where I've pre-traced the area where the motor mount goes. I did that prior to even, you know, gluing in and making sure all this is done. So I actually have some guidelines now. In here, you can see the motor plate itself has some area where glue goes around the edges. The glue around the edges is done so the glue can fill these areas and help glue everything together, so the motor mount doesn't take up the whole area. Okay. So it's really close, but I left a little bit of area for glue squish and the capability of that being able to go out and get into the side, so the whole cap and everything can be glued in. So when it's all glued in, I end up having a nice bead of super strong glue that goes around the edge. The cap itself has been pre-sanded, so that makes a really good adhesion on there. You take this area, even though I got a little bit marked, I'll go through and just lightly rough it up in a few areas so it takes the glue really, really well. I'll go ahead and rough that up a little bit. And then we will go ahead and glue in the motor mount. Now that I have this traced out and it fits, double check, make sure, put the motor mount back on the actual mounting plate. Pop it in there, make sure it looks straight, because once you do this, you probably can't go back. So now I have this mounted in there, and you can see the actual plate and everything mounts in the back really, really nicely. So now that it's all on there, we'll go ahead and end up gluing it in place. So go ahead and pull your motor plate off. What I'm going to go ahead and do is put a little bit of goop in that area. Right where the motor goes. The trick is take your popsicle stick, put a nice layer everywhere that the motor is going to mate. And any excess you can work it into the edges. So I will take a little excess and work it into the cracks and the edges. Okay, now we got a decent layer in there. Go ahead and stick the motor mount in there. Look at your alignment. Make sure it looks good. And press it down right into place. Looks like it's nice and straight. Sure it looks good. Now we're going to go ahead and put this plate on. Got a little bit of goop around the edge, a little bit more because it's going to fill. A lot of this is going to come out too, so. The place I'm putting a little bit more is out at the ends down here, which is these areas right here.
Nice fit, huh?
There's a really nice fit in there. Yeah. And everything should look very symmetrical when you put it down in here. The distance of your plate right to left, you can see that this fits right in here still. So all those areas should look good. If it looks off, what's nice is the glue is still a little wet, and you can manipulate it just a little bit in there.
Beautiful fit.
Beautiful fit. What I do is take a couple pins to lock it in. We'll lock it. Take that goop, and if you got any extra goop oozing out, rub it into the joints. It just makes it stronger. Yeah. So I usually will pin it front and back, and so it's in place. And then you can manipulate it a little bit. So now we have the motor mount gooped in. A little bit of goop's come out, so what I'm doing is I'm pushing that right back into those areas. So take your weight and put your weight on the trailing edge, and I can see some of the goop is actually pushing out of the trailing edge.
Press.
Yeah, you can see it works really good here. I'm gonna come around and take a look at the back side here. You can see it really close.
Yeah.
Now it's sandwiched in. You can see there's a little ooze coming out here and in these areas.
Yeah. Put some ballast on it.
There you go. And now it's coming out just a little bit. Perfect.
Yeah.
That's the way you want it.
Okay.
All right, yesterday we did the fiberglass wing spars on the bottom of the wings. So what we're going to do today is we're flipping the wings over, and we're going to finish up that I-beam system. So what I've done on here is cleared the ends out just a little bit so we can drop these in. I have, flipped the wings over. I've weighted the trailing edges. Before I weighted the trailing edges, I took an inspection of the actual wing and looked down the edge of the trailing edge and the leading edge and make sure they were straight before I put them down here. So what we're going to do now is weight these down, and we're going to go ahead and glue these in exactly like we did the bottom of the wings. So brand new tube of goop, a little bit of extra overlap on the spar, and now we're going to complete this I-beam system by impregnating the entire area of glue around the spar. And then again, give it a twist. Make sure it looks good. Give a little extra at the ends is always good. nice and smooth. I've already given it a twist. There we go. Now doing this is going to lock in the bottom spars and the top spars together like an I-beam. So in the aircraft you have foam in between the I-beams, and once that foam's in there and these are on the top and the bottom, you have a super strong spar that will allow this aircraft to tumble and bounce and you know, take some rough landings, and the foam between the I-beams will be a dampener, and the I-beams themselves will be the strength. So yesterday on the fuselage we did the motor mount area, we did the box spars, we put the spar caps and everything in the aircraft. We put the motor mount on the top, we've let that dry overnight. Today we are going to put the I-beam box spars for the fuselage on the top of the aircraft. First thing I want to do is look at the aircraft and make sure it looks nice and true. Once in a while, when these things are sitting in a box, traveling overseas to here, you might get a little twist in the airframe. I noticed this morning this one had a little twist in it, so what I did, I've already straightened it, what I did is I put a little bit of, I held the aircraft down and I put a little body English into it to get it straight, because I noticed the nose was just a little bit of a roll to the nose, and now that I look at it by eye, it looks a lot better than it did. So sometimes when these are shipped, they can be shipped, you know, a little bit crooked or the box on its side, and this will help straighten it out. So I do the same things with the wings. It's not EPO, it's EPP, so that's one reason we put these fiberglass spars in the aircraft, is to keep this stuff straight. It's very rigid, but if you see any twists in it, straighten it out prior to sparring it, because once you lock the spars in, it's going to be in there forever. So what we want to do is exactly like we did on the bottom, is we want to put about 1.5 inches of glue. Make sure you have your locking pins handy. So put the glue in just like we did yesterday. Wipe the excess off, hold it down, and strap it into place with a couple pins so it doesn't move. And once that, and wipe off the excess. And once that dries, we're going to go ahead and wrap it over the top of this fuselage. It's basically exactly like we did on the bottom. Alright, I've gone through and glued the spar on the one side of the aircraft to save a little bit of time here. You can see it was glued and pinned exactly like the video of the bottom spar. Run it over the top of the motor mount to give it some strength. Pinned it in a few places. It's been glued in multiple places with hot glue on the way down. You don't want to completely glue it in with hot glue unless you're going to laminate this whole fuselage, but to give it strength, having the spar covered in the goop like we do is the way to really give it the strength. So we'll go ahead real quick and do this other spar in fast fashion for you. So you can see the hot glue coming out a little bit. And as you go down the middle here, just add one keeper right in the middle. Wipe off the glue. What I like to do is right where the curvature is, the bend goes. Put one there. Bend it around that curve, make sure it looks good. And go ahead and add the hot glue in this curve up to the pin. Give it a bend. Push it down and in. There you go. Now that we have the pins in here, the glue is cooling off, our next process will be to put in the goop. So I will pull these pins off here on the other side, and we will go ahead and do a layer of goop down this side, and you're going to want to do this the same exact process on both sides. So make sure all of it's smooth. You got any lumps of goop off or hot glue off there? Just to make a smoother surface for the goop to go down. What we'll do is we'll start at the trail end. Be a little generous. This is where all your strength is. A little bit on the front of the spar, give it a little extra strength right there. There you go. Just give it a little light smooth out. Water or a wet finger. There you go. And when you do the other side, do it exactly the same. Just a nice bead of goop over the top for strength. Now you always do add a little bit at the front and the back, where the tip of the spar is. Alright, we went through and we've put all the spars in the channels. We've given the goop treatment. We've pressed it on the bench to where it's really nice and straight. And if you look right down the trailing edge, it's really, really nice and straight. And if you look down the leading edge, pretty darn straight. Okay. Now, this aircraft, you can see the spar cap. Gone through and actually put the tape around there, like this, and I've given it a layer of goop through there, and the same with this spar cap. What this does is, you can see on this one, the gaps are open a little bit. This allows the spar cap to be glued, and you can see this area where some of the goop had got in there. When it had done its curing, it actually pulled the spar cap closed. So what we're doing is we are taping this area off. We are going to pull some goop on here and work it right into that crack, and then right after you get that done, you're going to pull the tape off, and it leaves a nice layer of goop. And then when it cures, it pulls the gap together and really glues the top of the block in really, really nice. So that's our main goal for this, is to pull that together. So what you would do is some 5/8 inch wide tape, which is probably about 15 millimeters or so. You're going to want to put that on each side of this opening where the spar cap was put in. So I overlap maybe 6 or 8 millimeters. And the trick is, you're going to want to pull this off when the goop is still wet, but make it to where you can pull it off. And again, when you get done, it looks like this. So you're able to pull that gap closed and pull those spar caps closed. So, not wasting any more time. Again, not rocket science, just adding a few extra little things to this to make this build really nice. So I will go through and put a little bit of goop over that area, squirt it right down in the holes that are a little bit left over, the cracks, and then run a bead of goop over that area. And you can leave quite a bit on and push it right down into that crack on each side of that spar cap. And then come to the end and take your excess and work it right into that crack on the end. And then once that's done, you pull this off. And then you have the nice layer of goop on that edge. And then when you put the Plastidip on this airplane, we tape from this area back so the leading edge has Plastidip wrapping the whole leading edge, top and bottom, all the way back to the spars. And we do the same thing to the trailing edge. So now let's go to the trailing edge of this airplane. We'll do the same thing we did there. So we can add a layer of goop on there. This really locks the spars caps into place. And then you let it dry. As this goop cures, the goop will, again, like I said, it will take these small gaps and it will pull them closed, and it will fill that area with goop, so you don't have to worry about these spar caps not having adhesive in the cracks of them. I know when we glued them in, we put adhesive in the crack and pushed it all in. I'm just filling up any minute gap that might be left over and giving it some more strength to hold these spar caps in. Now we'll go ahead and do the fuselage, same way. We'll do just the first one, and you'll get the idea after this. Definitely want to take this tape off as soon as you get done here. You don't want to let this dry. I leave a decent layer still on there. It shrinks up and goes away anyways, as far as the weight is concerned. There we go. Once it's done, pull the tape off. There you go. Alright guys, we have the Drak fuse here, and I noticed one of them out of this batch of 10 I got had just a little bit of twist in the fuselage. And sometimes when things get shipped, and EPP is not as rigid in form holding as EPO. So what I've done, like I showed you in one of the other videos, is when I first get the airplane, you lay it down on the table, you look at the fuselage, and just look to see if there's any twist in it. If you see after, and well, you got to do this after you trim the knobs off. So trim all your nubs off, lay it on the table, you know, before you lock it all in. Make sure it looks straight. If you see that it's off, like you have a little twist in it, what's really nice about this foam is before you lock your spars in, you can come over to the nose and you can give it an adjustment. So if you see that it's off an adjustment, or if the tail end's a little bit out of whack, you can give it a little bit of adjustment. But the main thing is get, you know, if there's a little twist or something in here, just get the twist out. So what's nice is you can manipulate this. So take a look, pull it out, and it all looks pretty straight now. But I noticed there was a little bit of a tweak or twist in it. So one of the things you're going to want to do when you start doing this is take a look and get that adjusted. And you can tell once you're done, you can lay a weight, like a decent weight, in the middle of the fuselage, and you can see that it's nice and straight. And then you also have the option on this fuselage, if you want to put your motor mount in on the top first to lock this whole fuselage in. It's another alternative is to line this up. I put the motor mount in upside, as far as the actual motor bracket, I put it in upside down so it doesn't push on the table, but that holds this space perfectly, so it lines this mount up so you can draw the traced out lines for it. So if you put this in here and you line up these holes on this mount, you can see it gives me the perfect areas where I can draw the lines for both sides of this. So prior to gluing, you can lay this down, draw this all in, so you know where to put it down when you glue. So you do that, you glue it, you can put this in, you can leave this all weighted and everything glued in, and if you want, you can start with putting the spars in the top of the airfoil, knowing that you have this all straight because you straightened it all out, and then you can flip over and you can do the other side. So that's just another alternative on putting these spars in. I did one like this and it seemed to work out pretty good. I'm still learning myself on exactly the perfect process to put this in, but when I did see this one fuselage have a little bit of a twist in it, I figured I would go ahead and make this video to show you another way I did the process to make sure that the fuselage was straight when I locked it in. So, alright, we're going to go through and show you how to put the spars in the top of the airframe. The way I do it, usually heat up a piece of piano wire or a piece of maybe 440 rod, slide it into the airframe just lightly, at not a very harsh angle, just a nice angle. Once that's done, have your hot glue ready. You can stick this spar into the front of the plane. Just put a little bit of hot glue in the front. This process is the same for the top and the bottom of the plane on these I-beam spars. Stick it into that slot and just hold it down. Wipe the excess off. Let it cool off and go ahead and do the second one. And then wipe the excess off. There you go. Once that's said and done, you can use the hot glue gun to nail this down in a few different areas. Just pin it down, wipe off the excess. This gives the room for the goop. Just work the hot glue in a few places just to hold it down temporarily while this is going to dry after we put the goop on. Flip that off a little bit so it fits. Bend that in and press it into place. There you go. Then you can go back to the front end where you started. Pull those pins out. Take a brand new tube of goop or something fairly full. And work your goop over the top. There you go. That's it.